Well, last Monday afternoon, I wished our viewers a happy Monday morning. So I'm going to write the thing now, and we're going to wish everybody a happy Friday afternoon. And what a nice Friday afternoon it is. Where are you, Pat?
I remember
Where are you spending your afternoon?
I'm spending my afternoon. It's a lovely day here, Jude. It really is.
Oh, beautiful.
This is the third or fourth day in a row we've had, temperatures in double figures. It's lovely.
But the farmers are going to have a hard time now. Have you no feelings for the farmers?
3 days without rain in there and probably in bother.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's good for the soul. And what's the temperature there? It's up to over 12 years.
12, I think it is.
13, yes, 13 here.
Yeah,
brilliant, too good.
Absolutely.
I'll be going out for a walk after this, and I'll be that sunshine will melt all the twisted thoughts that have been planted by you during this talk. Okay. You spotted a little item in the Fermanagh Herald, which you thought was if not a straw in the wind, then certainly a pointer to something. Do you want to tell us about it, Pat?
Jude, I actually read it. Apparently it was in the Express. Apparently Arlene Foster now writes a column for the Express, the Daily Express, and it was picked up by the Fermanagh Herald. And she basically said St. Patrick's Day was too Irish, too green. And I thought, I thought for a minute, is this a piss take? And then I realized, no, she's deadly serious. She branded Joe Biden as a sort of speech as insulting to unionists. And she said the focus on the green was to the exclusion of unionism. She said Nancy Pelosi was a strident nationalist. And she said even in Chicago, they turned the river green on St. Patrick's Day. And she said it was just green, 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 green everywhere she looked. And she said it made, as a unionist, it made her feel uncomfortable. And she even had to go with Barack Obama in 2016. She said she was almost forced to go to America because of, she was the first minister and so on. And she says, against her better judgment, she was sort of invited to stay for a Barack Obama speech. And she says it was almost insulting how Ireland had fought for its freedom from Britain and all the rest of it. She says there's no acknowledgement of the people who are not of the Irish extraction living on the island of Ireland. Now, Jude, when I read it, I thought, is this for real? I genuinely did. Like, would you ask the Welsh to be less Welsh on St. David's Day, or the Scots to be less Scots? And by the way, would you ask Orange people to be less Orange? What she's really saying is the Irish shouldn't really celebrate as much because the unionists don't like it.
It's a case of how to win friends and influence people, I think.
Yeah.
Besides that, I thought she had left politics. Has she not left politics?
No, she's now doing this GB News. It's this right-wing channel. And she's also in the Express, which isn't exactly a bastion of liberal democracy either. I read it and I thought, how tone deaf does unionism really have to become? They're basically saying but by the way, the very thing they accuse the nationalist community of, they don't spot the wood for the trees type thing. She's basically saying to nationalists and Irish people, we don't like you being too green. And and the reason we don't, because we're orange and we want to be more orange. It's unbelievable mentality.
Yeah, it's funny, it's almost exactly the opposite of the way Sinn Féin behaved. Like Sinn Féin as a political party got into Stormont, which is, of course, if you look at all the symbols and statues and everything else in it, it's a totally unionist location. And in a way, they, how would you say, they infiltrated it. They suffused it with their nationalism and republicanism. Arlene and unionists have been given the opportunity to do something similar, if they want, with St. Patrick's Day, particularly St. Patrick's Day in the States. And looking at, did they go? Did any, apart from Gordon Lyons, did any unionist politician go to St. Patrick's Day?
Not as far as I'm aware. No.
So, you really haven't got any grounds for complaining. It's the old thing of standing on the sidelines and being really upset by people being different from you. I think Mary Lou McDonald was on TV the other night, and she said something, the old saying, those days are gone and they're not coming back again.
Yeah.
I think really somebody will have to tell Arlene that, but maybe she knows it, and she knows that you still keep beating the drum, and that's what people listen to.
But as well as that, Jude, that I wrote an article for the Mirror last week, and when I thought about it, when I read Arlene's article, I thought, geez, she must have nearly read the article, because I basically said last week that the Americans, the nationalist community, John Hume particularly, but various, went to America, cultivated the opinion farmers and the influencers, went to all the worked assiduously the big circles, the media circles, and political circles to win friends and influence nationalism, and so on. Unionism almost internalized and or domesticated their position. Didn't reach out, didn't try to sell unionism, didn't try to sell it as something good and outreaching. And now I think it's too late. There's no way unionism is going to win friends and influence people, because their whole attitude is actually, not either generous or or reaching out.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that America. She's talking about Joe Biden's speech being insulting. I would say that Americans are a bit insulted by the fact that unionism sent. The only representative was this guy called Gordon Lyons. I'll bet 99% of them never even heard of him before.
Not at all.
So it's almost, to them, it's a calculated insult to the president of America and Gordon Lyons to balance. To balance.
Well, by the way, I did remember Gordon Lyons was interviewed on both UTV and BBC, and I remember in a room awash with green, he was the only person that wasn't wearing anything green.
Dear. Well, again, you see, maybe it's like Paisley in the old days. Remember his famous Oxford Union speech about giving out about the fact that Catholics believed that this was the body and blood of Christ. He was doing it for the people back home, not for the ones in Oxford. Maybe that's Gordon Lyons. He's maybe he's nothing personal. It's just business. He's got to keep.
Well, like Paisley, when he was in the European Parliament, didn't give a monkey's what he thought about him in Paris or Brussels or anywhere else. He was playing back to the people in Ballymena and Hull and wherever.
And the more they tried to usher him off, the more pleased he was, actually, because they're
I'm standing up for you.
Okay, let's move on to the second item, and this is something I'm genuinely puzzled by: the state of COVID at the moment. Now, I'm watching football on TV and I'm watching various parades, and there's no sign of people wearing masks or anything like that. Yet you're saying that it's actually up and biting us once again.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned this, Jude, is there's 23,000 cases in the Republic yesterday, and one of the senior bods in the health service executive was saying that the hospitals are starting to grow in a wee bit again. The numbers coming in, and Jude, and the reason I mentioned it also is it's in my family circle. There's one person who has been positive for 10 days in a row. Every time he takes a test, he's been positive. My eldest son and his wife and children were off, like they're school teachers, so it's nearly inevitable they're going to get it. They have been off this week with it, and quite a few people I know have got COVID. In fact, my eldest son, he said this is the second time he's got it. He says this time was actually worse than the first time.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it as bad? Is it?
He said this time it's an upper respiratory thing, and for a couple of days he said breathing problems and all the rest. Now, Jude, apparently if you're young and healthy, these things, it's grand. But if you have any underlying conditions or any sort of health problems, this is not. That guy Kingston Mills, he's a professor at Trinity. He said it was almost inevitable that this would happen. He says this BA2 strain, or whatever I think it's called, and allied to the fact that everybody has stopped wearing masks, stopped social distancing. Jude, I was at a function last night in Donegal, and there was no sign of a mask anywhere. And I was watching myself and my dear missus were in Derry yesterday morning, or the morning before, sorry. And she was in the shop, and I watched people coming out. Jude, nobody, and I mean nobody, wearing masks. And these are all communal settings, in shops.
Just let me ask you a personal question about that event you were at then in Donegal. Were you wearing a mask?
No.
Why not?
Well, it was actually a meal thing, so it would be very difficult. But I remember, and I thought, when my wife said we get out, we should put on masks, and I said, well, jeepers, nobody else is wearing masks now. What's the point?
That's it. That's it. But I think that people, I take my cue. I mean, it's pathetic actually, but I take my cue from the fact of what are other people doing. If I go into somewhere and nobody's wearing a mask, I feel sort of stupid putting on a mask. So I have to decide between them dying of embarrassment or maybe dying of COVID. And the terrible truth is I choose to look after embarrassment rather than dying of COVID. It's crazy. I mean, the authorities are behind this because they have relaxed restrictions. Is it that they figure now that the economy is too important to try to get work going back to normal?
I think
or do you think a mass immunity, herd immunity, or what?
I think what's happened, Jude, and I really genuinely think I think they've reached a stage and we can't keep on sort of interrupting everything, that we're going to have to sort of turn the ship around and face into the storm and go for it, because we can't keep Jude, it must be costing fortunes, people staying off. And the Republic, like, they were given COVID payment schemes for people who weren't working, 350 euros a week. And that was, and they, because of all the different things that are in Ukraine, the rise in fuel prices, the rise in food prices, I think they've reached a stage that it's not sustainable economically to keep doing these things.
Are the hospitals filling then? I mean, if there's more cases, if it's, you said that your son, was it that it was even worse than before, or really was grim?
Well, I think what they're saying this time is this one is much more infectious, but not as strong. That's not as far as I can know from my son. It's not. That was not his experience. The first one he got, he said it was very light. But he said this time was just 2 days that it felt rough. But he said that was it. But
you see, if they're not going into hospital, people aren't being reduced to hospital by and large. Then I suppose the state decides, well, we better get people back to work, and we'll just have to put up with it. My fear would be that they would be overly optimistic, but the degree to which it will remain a minor thing. And as I say, it puts you in a bit of a quandary, because if you believe yourself that people should be wearing masks, and they're not wearing masks, and then they convert you to not wearing masks, that's a bad thing. It shows you the strength of public sort of attitude.
Peer pressure, Jude.
Exactly. Peer pressure. So I'd rather die of embarrassment. Okay. The one person who's not going to die of embarrassment is this, from this story you've cited, is the CEO of P&O. He's not going to die of embarrassment.
Oh, God. Something, Jude, it's a story that actually strikes me. Peter Hebblewith, he's on something like nearly 400,000 a week, or 400,000 a year, as chief executive of P&O. And the stunt they pulled this week is almost bordering on gangsterism, corporate gangsterism. They sacked 800 workers without any consultation, and they know they've broken the law. And I think the bottom line of it all is they're saying, what he's going to do about it, because there's always now, I think Boris Johnson has introduced a culture in Britain where the rich and the powerful look at this and said, well, we can get away with that, and it's happening. They admitted yesterday at a committee meeting in the House of Commons that they had broken the law. They openly admitted it and said, look, well, I was either that or whatever, the company wouldn't exist. And he wasn't trying to he just basically said, yeah, we did. And Jude, years ago there would have been you would expect some sort of sanction. I am taking the view that Mr. Hebblewith factored in the fact that he knowingly broke the law, figured we will get away with it, and that's a price worth paying.
Yeah, well, I'm not. Well, I certainly think it's pretty awful when you have the CEO saying, "I broke the law, so what?" But if you think back, in all sorts of cases, in all sorts of big companies, people do things and then they claim they didn't do them, or they did them and they didn't realize it was against the law. They make excuses for themselves. The difference this time is this guy hasn't bothered with excuses. He's just said, "Hey, I broke the law. I broke." So if you can almost say, at least he's being honest about being dishonest. Being honest.
But also that's true. But I also think it's almost a sort of a contempt. Like, I know we broke a law, so what he's going to do about it? And I think it's a stage further on. The other ones are sort of scared of admitting that they'd broken the law. this time, and in fact, I don't think it's a positive, and I don't think you can spin it as a positive. He's basically saying, yeah, we knew that no union would agree to what we were proposing. So to hell with the unions, there was no consultation. We know it breaks the law, but 800 workers, and it's capitalism before people, profits before people. So our profits were going down, and we were in bother. So to hell with it. And as well as that, we aren't going to pay people the minimum wage. We only pay that on domestic routes. Once they're on the international seas, they're paid something like $5.50 an hour. What is it? I think it's at £9 an hour. What it is in Britain, the minimum wage.
Well, I think that really, as you said, it's capitalism in action. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you're a big company, you've got one central goal, and that is to have a bottom line that shows you're making a profit. And the bigger the profit you're making, the better. That's the bottom line. Everything else is subsidiary to that. So in a way, I'm not that surprised that they have sacked workers that are paying £9 an hour or €9 or whatever, and replaced them with people who are going to take less. The question is, if he has broken the law, is the sanction, is the punishment for that going to be sufficient that'll stop him doing it again, or some similar company?
No, I don't. That's the reason I'm fascinated with this story, Jude. I don't think it will. In fact, already apparently there's no law in Britain to stop them. Now, by the way, they can't sack their Irish workers the same way because of EU law, and they can't sack their French workers or whatever because of EU. But because of Brexit, they can.
Well, so I mean, does this guy know that this company is not going to be penalized, not going to be fined? Surely, if he said it's against the law, there must be some sanction that can then be applied to him.
Well, it remains to be seen. Like the fact that the guy, I presume he's got top legal advice and all the rest of it. And he went in yesterday to that committee and admitted it. So I presume like they've worked it all out. Whatever sanction or whatever penalty they get, I presume they factored that in and said it's still worth it.
It must be a paper, yeah. In other words, it's a paper tiger, if you will, like the punishment. But surely, what kind of a government? Well, I suppose it's Boris Johnson's government. But what kind of a government would look at that, see what happened, see that the sanctions that were applied to him then were, sufficiently mild that he could take them, and wouldn't then immediately enact the law, making sure anybody else tries this, we'll bloody well take you to the cleaners.
I'm working on the basis that, on the surface, Boris Johnson will say, tut, this is terrible. This is disgraceful treatment of workers. And underneath, they'll be saying, no problem, we'll look after you.
Well, again, I'm not that surprised. I'm surprised, I suppose, by the frankness of the way they talk. But I'm not too surprised by the fact that there isn't a sanction that's really going to hurt them. And I'm not surprised that they're going for the bottom line being, we want to make money. That's the name of the game. Forget it, you guys. Let's see a few other things. There was Micheál Martin, Pat, he's reported in the Irish Examiner. Apparently, President Zelensky singled out Ireland as being a bit on the lukewarm side with regard to the possibility that Ukraine would join the EU. And Micheál has been backing away from it as quick as he can. Did you see that item?
No, I didn't. So you'll have to fill me in.
Okay, well, here's Micheál talking about it. You see, the charge is that President Zelensky said that they're thinking of applying or, a speeded track to become part of the EU. And he's mentioned Ireland. What he calls Ireland, he means 26 counties. I'll have to write him a letter about that. He said Ireland was being just a bit slow about it, and were only partly supportive of the case for the Ukraine joining the EU. And here's Micheál in the Irish Examiner. I spoke to him, Zelensky that is, last week, and he was very strongly in praise of the Irish contribution, both from a humanitarian perspective and also in terms of our clear support for Ukraine's application to join the European Union. So he thanked me personally. Goes on like that as to what a good guy he was. Is he calling Zelensky a liar then?
I don't know.
Kind of both ways.
I thought, this tightrope they were trying to walk on about neutrality. We can send humanitarian aid, but we can't send military aid. Now, apparently there's a whole lot of missiles, I don't know how many, down about somewhere in an army barracks, down about the Curragh somewhere. And in the early days of the, somebody said they're only sitting down there gathering dust. Why the hell don't we give them to the Ukrainians? I think they're some anti-air force things or something like that, I'm not sure. And so on. But I remember Coveney was trying to dance on the head of a pin by saying why we should do this, but we couldn't do that. Why we should do that, but we shouldn't do this type thing. So I presume Germany has gone totally away from this neutral stance. Finland's the same. Sweden's the same. Ireland is the one that seems to be having this sort of neutrality debate thing. So, Jude, I'm not sure how all that plays in or what's Mihal's thinking. But Zelensky, if he singled out Ireland, must have something on his mind.
But he's not talking, actually, he's not talking about their support of the war effort. He's talking about their attempt to become, their application to become members of the EU. I frankly think, I think it's a bad move. Sorry, Pat, go ahead.
No, I don't know, Jude. I've found the Dublin government's attitude a wee bit odd on a couple of things. Now, I wasn't aware about this EU thing, but I remember listening to them about the, I thought if Sweden and Finland and Germany could change the position about this, I was wondering why we're so moralistic, but go ahead. I wasn't aware.
I'll come back to that again. I just want to do this thing about the EU application by the Ukraine. I think if Ireland, in quotation marks, was dragging its feet or wasn't only lukewarm about the idea of Ukraine joining the EU, I think they were dead right. I mean, are they really trying to provoke Russia? The West going to the point where it's essentially scratching its rear end against the border with Russia?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's crazy. And I don't know what the hell they're at. Are they trying to get things so that the Ukraine will be so tightly bound into the EU that the EU and NATO will have to go to war with Russia? It seems to be nuts. So ironically, while Mihal's trying to say that, oh no, he'd express his total support of the Ukraine's application, I hope to God he hasn't. I hope he has more wit. I really think that's a disaster. Now, the other thing about all these countries becoming warlike, arming and so on, you're absolutely right, because I spotted an item, where I find it now. Oh yes, the IT had an editorial on it today, the Irish Times. They're talking about rebuilding Germany's neglected defense forces is a timely task, they say. And they say that at the same time, there's a poll in Germany, and most people, only 19% of Germans are optimistic about the next 12 months. That's the lowest since 1949. 76% feel threatened by Russia's Ukraine invasion. But up to now, the reason Germany wasn't a heavily armed nation was that everybody remembered the Second World War and the First World War.
The First War,
and everybody would have said, most people would have said, isn't it great that this country that created or was at least a major factor in 2 world wars has sort of abandoned that and has developed up economically. And now here they're turning around and saying, oh, isn't it great? Germany is now really going to get tanks and weapons and spend 100 billion euro on it.
The only thing is, factors have changed now. That, if you think about what 1956, Russia invaded Hungary against a nascent democracy there. Jude, for all its faults, Ukraine, you can argue about poking the tiger and all the rest, but the Russians, and 2008, annexed Crimea, and then they went, Georgia, and then they went into Georgia, I think, first, and then annexed Crimea, and then they went into sort of the Donbass and that eastern Ukraine, and then they went for a full-on invasion of Ukraine, and obviously this last month. Now, you can say, on a scale of 1 to 10, okay, Ukraine mightn't be perfect, but I would give them about 2. On the scale of 1 to 10 as regards to aggression, the Russians are up about 8. So what do you do? Do you just, I can understand the Germans saying, wait a minute, the Russians, everybody seems to think that Putin won't do this and won't do that. He's proved them wrong every time they think, he lied through his teeth up until the very last, we have no intention. And all these embassies and ambassadors were saying, no, that this is typical Western propaganda. We have no intention of invading Ukraine and so on. And then what do? Invades Ukraine. And he's on record. Hold on a second. He's on record as saying that he wants to rebuild the old USSR.
I don't believe that. I really don't believe that. I mean,
whether you believe it or not.
Okay, so he said that, but I mean, as you've just pointed out, he will say all sorts of things that he doesn't actually mean, and events show that he doesn't mean them. He does the opposite. But I really, really don't believe that Russia is set on recreating the USSR. Russia today is not the powerful Soviet Union that we knew. They simply aren't. They've got nuclear weapons. So is a lot of countries. India's got nuclear weapons. Israel got so there's a whole lot of countries that got nuclear weapons. But so Russia certainly has invaded the Ukraine. My take on it is this, Pat. I honestly think this. I think they're determined somehow to stop the West coming so close to them. They want buffer states between them and the West. And I don't think they want to really run the Ukraine particularly, because it's, for starters, so bloody costly in their lives of their soldiers. But I think they want to make sure that it's not, there you are, you see what's happened. They don't want it to be a full flush member of the EU or of NATO, because that would mean they'd have no protection.
I've heard all these arguments, Jude, and I sort of agree with them, and I take that point. But Jude, there's 42 million Ukrainians who were given a democratic election, I think, in 1992, and 87 or 88%, I remember reading, voted. And they voted by a huge majority to go for democracy, to get out of under the aegis of Russia. At the last election, only 2% voted for the far right. Apparently, Ukraine is the sort of the breadbasket nearly of Europe. They're big into their agriculture and the foodstuffs and all the rest of it. Apparently, it's a very civilized, nice country. They have a nice lifestyle, and they were progressing. Now they inherited a lot of problems, including some Nazism and all the rest of it. Now, but Russia's basically saying, no, we will decide for 44 million people or 42 million.
Okay.
And I don't think Russia's got the right to do that.
I would agree with you. Actually, it doesn't have the right to. This is the way they have chosen, is that they'll invade Ukraine, bash up buildings, destroy cities.
Your point, you've made the point several times about the fact. Can you imagine if tomorrow morning in Canada was joined up with China and was a sphere of influence right on America's door? I accept that, but they all say the story. See if I don't know, many people live in Canada, 60 million or something. If they decide that they're going to join up with Cuba, I don't think it gives the Americans the right to say. The Canadians have a right to decide what is in their interest.
I would agree, but inevitably they wouldn't. I mean, it's also the case that again, the world knows it, that South America has been interfered with again and again by the United States.
Venezuela, so the Americans
Chile, a lot. Just one last thing on this topic, and it worries me, because the thought I have is gallant little Belgium for the First World War. Because here's the Irish Times, the sober Irish Times, with its editorial. It says, the obligation of Auschwitz is not to avoid war forever, as his critics have claimed, Schultz or whatever his name is, the new German guy, but to intervene, if necessary, militarily, to avoid even greater human suffering. That sounds suspiciously like we're going to have to go to war in order to avoid war.
Yeah.
Oh, scary.
By the way, let me tell you, I remember watching a program years ago, Jude. It was about the Koreans and about the way they'd been treated on the run up to the Second World War, including even women being, snatched from villages for comfort for Japanese soldiers. And they used to behead Koreans, the Japanese regularly, and so on. And it was said there was two countries in the world that should never be sort of armed or allowed to get, because of their national arrogance. It was Japan in the East and Germany in the West. And they said once they got in control, their behavior was never good. And we had two world wars because of Germans. Whatever.
But the last thing I'll say, Pat, on this is that in both cases, Japan lost the war, Germany lost the war. and the history of any war is written by the victors.
Yeah.
So I actually, my son's married to a woman who's half Japanese, and he went to Japan with her to meet sort of, I suppose, family members. Her mother was from Japan, and he said that people were so dignified and nice and courteous to an embarrassing degree.
Yeah.
And again, it's like faulty towers with the Germans. For God's sake, the Germans are wonderful. They're wonderful people. They're fantastic people. They can make things run. They can make things work. They have produced great music. I mean, you listen to Beethoven or some of these guys.
Yeah.
My God, there's no comparison. So in many ways, they are superior to other countries. I just get worried about saying these are innately warlike people. I think circumstances make people warlike.
The Germans produced the concentration camps they also produced the SS. They also produced.
No, the Germans didn't produce the concentration camps.
In the Boer War, but hold on. They refined them to an extent.
Oh yeah, I mean that was a terrible. I agree with that. Totally agree with you there. Shocking, absolutely shocking. Mind you, who was the first and only country to use the atom bomb? America. But it gets to buy ball. Because that was America.
Yeah, they're the good guys. Yeah. I'm not.
The world's gone mad, Pat. The world's gone mad. We have to do something.
Most of these things, there's no such things as everybody's good and everybody's bad. There's usually.
Well, let's just keep an eye on. The danger is, you see, you get caught up in this fever of war, I think, where you say, I can't have this, we can't have this, can't have this. And I mean, the Irish Times, and that editorial, I can't believe it. If you read it, you'll see it. They talk about the danger that Olaf Scholz might engage in anxious navel gazing rather than getting to work with lots of weaponry and get stuck in the war. That's sort of horrible. I think there's a better tomorrow, better way. It's unbelievable. Human beings, after so many hundreds, thousands of years, have evolved to the point where they settle their differences by blowing each other to shit.
They're up again.
It's unbelievable. Okay, that happy thought, and on this fine Friday afternoon, can I say I wish you a happy weekend.
Happy weekend, Jude. Good luck to you.